behind. When all the world seems in tune, and love goes on softly home. So don't be sighing or crying, dear, if winter comes.
Welcome to the umpteenth Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. I've stopped counting them, and it's a good thing because going forward, we're going to be doing a lot of them. I'm Scott Eric Kaufman, otherwise known as S03e02, unfortunately. This is Steve Attewell. We are going to be talking about this episode of Game of Thrones, the majority of which I will be handing off to my esteemed co-podcaster. Jesus. Names. Co-host. That sounds much better than co-podcaster. Because in visual terms, you know, I'll talk a little bit about why this wasn't the most interesting of episodes, but in narrative terms, they did a lot of work. And since the narrative is Steve's bag, I will let him get started. So off you go.
Okay, so I thought we'd do sort of as a way to structure this, a series of comparison and contrasts, because, you know, there's some very interesting kind of pairings of similar things happening in this episode. So I thought we'd start with Bran meeting the Reeds and Sansa meeting the Tyrells as kind of an interesting pairing in that in both cases we have a Stark encountering a new group of actors and who are very important in sort of the overarching meta story. One in the sort of the metaphysics of Westeros, and one in the politics of Westeros, and then ultimately facing the question of, do you tell the truth and do you trust people? And it shakes out very differently for both of them, that Bran is given knowledge, right? He's told things about himself that he did not know before. That he's a warg, which means he can enter the consciousness of animals for newbies. And he's also a green seer, meaning he can see the past, the present, the future, and Sansa, on the other hand, gives away knowledge. She says, she finally speaks the truth after, at this point, 2 full seasons, and says, Joffrey is a monster.
Big line for her. And I mean, that's one of the few moments where if they, visually speaking, they ruined that close-up by going to it too early. They should have kept a medium long shot on her and then just given her that line in that close-up, but they opted for the close-up too early. See, I'm just going to bitch and moan the whole time about the direction.
One thing I did like in that scene is they really like doing there's one character that you're focusing on, and then there's 2 characters on either side of them. Because they'll do the same thing with Arya.
It's creating. It's a way of creating a conspiracy. If doing a 3-shot instead of a 2-shot is a way to put in people's minds, even if they're not actually saying anything or actively conspiring. If you just show them enough on camera together, you will begin to believe that these people have a relationship. I mean, this is sort of the modus operandi of Doctor Who. You know, why are these people running around in outer space with this guy they just met? Well, you just show them together enough, and eventually you'll be like, oh, they're meant for each other. And so it's a similar thing. The way that they have those cuts, you know, in the Sansa scene, those things are just made to. You need one shoulder and then another shoulder and then the main character. And when it's triangulated, as it is in the episode, you just think, all right, these people are in league together, and it's all kosher, which Sansa should not actively think at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of her. I mean, it's a question as to whether it's a mistake, but it is certainly a moment where she has accepted an offer of friendship that may or may not be legitimate.
She's very quickly, but the one thing I'll say in her defense, because I've had students who, you know, most of my students hate her, but a couple of them will be vigorous defenders of her. She's all alone at this point. I mean, she has no one.
And it's not really clear that there's even a smart play for her besides making this alliance, because even the defensive pose of, I love Joffrey, Joffrey is the king, I am a traitor, blah, 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 that's only a shield, that's a limited shield. It doesn't get you very far. And the Tyrells are a group with real power. And
you're right that, I mean, even in terms of and now I'm digging deep in my bag, but even in terms of the sort of, proportionality of screen time, Sansa gets about as much as Joffrey does in terms of setting them up against each other. And
that's interesting.
None. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of setting up alliances, Joffrey seems to become, he's set up as more monstrous in the same episode that, oh crap, maybe there is more interesting to this, and I'm just dumb today. All right, go on.
Okay, so interesting thing about Bran's sort of section, I have no idea what they're doing with the three-eyed raven is you, which I worry comes off as like New Age garbage, because it is very easy to get too New Agey with the whole Bran storyline. But I love the fact that the name Howland Reed is spoken, which for book fans is like, I was really worried that was never going to happen on the show.
I'm sort of a little at odds on how to talk about this without
spoiling everything.
I do think you're right that the phrasing it, the Raven is you, is sort of grammatically backwards. And what they do later in the episode with Mackenzie Crook, right, as the Bard,
yes. I did think that was a nice. It was a very short scene with John,
or whatever.
It was a very short scene with John, but it was like a nice repetition of like, okay, there is such a thing as wargs. We're showing you a warg. Now we're confirming that Bran is a warg. These are wargs. Get it?
And again, I don't know. They chose a good person to be a proxy to someone, since, I mean, if you go to Pirates of the Caribbean all the way back to the original offense, right, Mackenzie Crook has always been
the explicator.
But he's always been someone to someone else, right? Assistant to the regional manager. Never the regional manager
Curse will follow him
forever. Yeah, and they did, and this, I guess this would be my one point, which is sort of a meta point. They did a really interesting job of choosing actors for important roles who have already established themselves as, and we're talking about the Reeds, so I think that's sort of I mean, now I can't remember his name, but the guy that got to play Jojen is...
He's the kid from Love Actually.
Oh, see, that's not where I got... No,
well, that was where everyone else seemed to be going with it, but yeah, he's from Doctor Who. Yeah, well,
He had a watch that had the entire Doctor in it, and he had that...
Yeah.
I mean, so the whole idea that he is the person who is going to help Bran deal with the present, the past, and the future is really appropriate. Just like Mackenzie Crook being the person who...
Speaking of which, right now on BBC Radio, they're doing a radio adaptation of Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, with Sherlock Holmes as the Angel of Islington, Natalie Dormer is Dor, and James McAvoy is Richard Mayhew. That's just like, that kind of breaks my brain a little bit.
All right, if you haven't been with us, we have just had a series of nerdgasms. We apologize for that. It's inevitable. You're watching a Game of Thrones podcast. Shut the fuck up. All right.
Yeah. So one final little like uber nerd tidbit. This was something that I just got after like 5 times of reading the books. Howland Reed's name. Howland Reed owns a moving castle.
Oh, holy crap! Yeah.
That is such like a weird deep cut to throw into the series.
And that's not an accident.
Yeah. Oh no, George R.R. Martin loves doing this shit. So, switching over to Sansa, I mean, one of the things I thought was interesting is the gender subtext in this episode. That Bran and Jojen are both characters who are shown not living up to the masculine ideal. There's that interesting bit where Osha, who, normally wildlings are sort of shown as like not quite a proxy vehicle for 21st century values, but in some ways kind of they are, sort of saying, what's wrong with this guy? And
what does it need protection? Yeah.
Yeah, whereas Mira kind of points out this very different thing, which is, I protect him, but that's kind of a common sense arrangement in that she can't see the future, and he can. And there's this interesting parallel, both of them kind of have their weaknesses made up for by spiritual power, which is kind of an interesting contrast to the way that Brienne is guarding Jaime, in that he's someone who has lived up to that masculine ideal, and there's now a question mark over that.
And that might be one way to bridge what I was talking about before we got started. I was noting that structurally the episode sort of annoyed me because you want the beginning and the end to have some sort of relationship to each other, and I was having a hard time kind of fitting Bran and Jojen at the beginning with the scene at the end with Jaime and Brienne. But that might be a way to do it. I still don't think so. I think this was a narrative-driven episode, and they were not as concerned with structure as they should have been. But like I said, it seems like the first of a two-parter. That isn't a two-parter. And you mentioned that they took Arya out of the first episode, like shoved all the Starks into this one.
Yeah.
Which I believe you when you say that, because there seemed something off balance about it.
Yeah. So, the last thing I want to say about this pair of scenes is just how amazed I am at Diana Rigg and Natalie Dormer working together. And that very interesting scene of this locus of female power out in the garden where everything is growing, and they kind of using gender as illusion. That they sort of say to her, we're just women here, there is no threat to, from us, when clearly there is huge potential threat. They just aren't going to tell you.
And that actually, that makes the sort of almost vaudevillian gag with the cheese make more sense. Oh,
yeah.
Because that's just a demonstration of, I understand that Joffrey has been abusing you and that things have been bad with you and men. So here, watch me order around the cheese boy.
Who's probably a minor relative of hers.
Yeah, no, that actually makes a lot of sense now. I think that scene works a little better.
Yeah, I mean, I still miss Butterbumps and, singing The Bear and the Maiden Fair.
Yeah, they're never going to put that on TV.
Well, the song's going to be in the show, but just not now.
Oh.
Yes, it's going to be in a later episode that bears the title of The Bear and the Maiden Fair.
I'm tired of singing in fantasy movies. I just had it up to here with The Hobbit. And
well, I mean, I think Martin does it in an interesting way that even Tolkien doesn't. Where
no.
Well,
No. I think you're right. I was just saying Tolkien doesn't really do it a very interesting way at all.
Yeah. Although I still I forget who did it. What the Hobbit cartoon, the 90-minute version.
No. The Lord of the Rings cartoon or the original?
No. Specifically the Hobbit.
The Hobbit. Yeah. No, the Hobbit. That's great. I mean,
I love those songs as a kid. They don't all hold up.
Greatest Adventure, exactly. Although now I can't get it separated in my head from the Lemmy Winks episode of South Park, which we'll insert a little bit of audio in for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about. We'll do a little Hobbit, a little South Park, just so you know. Okay. I can do that.
All right, so our next pair of scenes, also, again, dealing with this interesting question of gender and power, is how Cersei handles Joffrey versus how Marjorie handles Joffrey. And that was quite impressive. That in the first scene you really see a Joffrey who is incredibly all about strict gender lines, right? Men don't wear flowers, women obey men, and seems incapable of basic understanding of Cersei's questions about how do you feel about another human being you don't want to kill. And Cersei really struggling to find a way in here. She lacks empathy towards her own son. Not sympathy or love, but empathy.
When I was rewatching that scene today, the one thing I noticed is that, I could just imitate it. I could just go like this, which, for those of you listening, I'm leaning back very casually, pretending like everything is all right and normal. And there's a coiled snake quality to her performance in that scene. Yeah. Rewatching it, that Marjorie, she actually is, very effusive and she's energetic. Oh, Joffrey teach me about the crossbow. Whereas Cersei is realizing that what she's doing isn't working.
Yeah.
And she almost seems to be biding her time, but there's a bit of menace to the biding that I didn't catch the first time through. I just sort of felt sorry for her. It's like, well, Joffrey's going to be an asshole again. Go figure.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, I mean, from a book perspective, how much of Joffrey's gender politics are her gender politics? That, in a way she's created her own monster because she's someone who has defined her life by the restrictions of gender, has railed against them like shaking the bars on her own prison cell, and then completely recreating them in her son, and is now kind of like, oh my god, what have I done?
Yeah, she hasn't. And I think that's part of the realization that she was having when I say she's sort of withdrawing for a moment,
or recoiling, one might say.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, back when we were in high school taking chemistry classes, and we mixed a few ingredients together, and we're like, this is going to be great. And then we're looking at it, and it's starting to do something, but we're not quite sure what it's doing. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of sit back, and we're like, all right, I think we need safety goggles now. I think things are about to get really bad. That sort of failed experiment.
I like that. I like it. Failed experiment is about right.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see if they sort of diverge from the books in this sense, because without getting any kind of spoiler territory, in the end she goes to the mat for her son.
Yeah, I mean, they've already gone so much off-piste on Joffrey and Cersei's relationship that I don't know if they're even going to end up there. So that's kind of an open question.
But there's a there. Yeah. We're not sure they're going to get there.
Yeah. Whereas, by contrast, Marjorie plays this master class in how to manipulate somebody and using empathy, using understanding of someone whose emotional state is deeply abnormal. And you can see her working the angles. That first she plays the stupid girl card because she knows he's a paranoid misogynist. So she kind of creates an illusion that she can hide behind while she's working out where the levers are. What was her line? The subtleties of politics escape me. Like, never has anyone lied more boldly through their teeth.
No one who says that the subtleties of politics escapes them actually. Yeah. It's weird because I'm actually thinking more about her conversation with Sansa, and something that struck me as weird while I was watching it, which was, and in comparison, and without being too crude, it's really strange that when they cut from Sansa, when she's talking to Marjorie, and Marjorie's great aunt, whose name is flown right in my head. Yeah.
Her grandmother.
Her grandmother. She's displaying cleavage to Sansa, and the director, I think it's Minahan this time. He goes to that medium long shot, so you actually get from a little bit above, the belly button up, to kind of emphasize that she's showing cleavage to Arya, and
Sansa.
Sansa. Sorry, yeah, Sansa.
Mm-hmm.
No. Yes, I'm transporting characters all the way around.
Even longer.
Yeah, but what's strange is that she doesn't do that with Joffrey. Like, and Minahan doesn't do that with Joffrey. He doesn't emphasize her sexuality.
Well, I think that's because, however she does, she clearly figures out Joffrey's sexuality is not normal, and that she's going to have to work a bit harder to figure this out. And there's an interesting moment where
they both caress the crossbow. Yeah.
Even before that I'm going to get into. But there's a moment even before that where he's almost pointing the crossbow at her, and is like asking her about, like, basically the subtext is, "Did you fuck Renly? And doesn't that mean I can kill you?" And she throws Renly under the bus on issues of sexuality. She basically says, "I wanted to be a wife," subtext, "I'm interested in sex." Okay, let's see if this works. But Renly was interested in the longest circumlocution for anal sex ever invented. And Joffrey, it turns out, is a Republican, in case anyone hadn't guessed. He's obsessed with crossbows, and he wants to ban gay sex. Which is
this is a liberal podcast. Yes,
yes, I know. Well, if you've come to the blog, you know where you are.
Exactly.
Which is an interesting contrast from Jaime, who, while he also spends much of the episode kind of mocking Renly's sexuality, he's doing it from a place of kind of mocking Brienne.
Brienne, yeah.
And ultimately, he has a real point to make, where he says, we don't get to choose who we love. Now, granted, I don't think anyone's about to equate, gay rights with the right to incest, but, for Jaime, he's being very sincere in that moment.
But that also seemed to almost to knock it at Brienne's feelings for Cat, that they went beyond.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Right. I mean, I thought that's what I sort of took from that he was.
I thought he was more mocking Brienne as like a failed. You didn't know. This emotional. Well that's been building up inside you, because it didn't show so much in the books, but in the show, but in the books in season 2, or A Clash of Kings.
Yeah.
Like, Brienne is genuinely not just kind of admiring of Renly. She desires him. She wants to be the person who, dresses and undresses him. And,
See, that's why I thought he was calling her, basically saying that she was a lesbian.
I got more that she was a fag hag, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think...
Yeah.
Yeah. Half dozen or one of the other. I mean,
no.
Obviously he was trying to insult her sexuality and say that whatever your proclivities are, they were misplaced with regards to.
And there was some interesting gender stuff going on there too, because there was that great line where he said, what was it? He said, Renly was interested in little girls like Loras. You're far too much man for him, which is just like all over the place.
Yeah.
But getting back to the crossbow, I mean, it's a very unsubtle sexual metaphor, but it's very interesting to see what Marjorie is doing, in that she's clearly recognizing this guy only can access the erotic side of himself through violence.
Through violence, yeah.
And either I'm going to be the object of that violence or the subject of that violence. And you can see
the facilitator of it.
Or the facilitator. And you can see, like, for relatively, I mean, Joffrey almost never looks aroused by anything. And you can see, like, when she has the crossbow and she's like, would you like to see me kill someone? He's into it. And I was just impressed by, that's not an easy kind of read to make, and she makes it very, very easily.
Well, and she is sort of cheating, though. I mean, she did have Sansa tell her he's a monster, which isn't, another way of saying, offer to go hunting with him. See what he does to, fuzzy bunnies when he shoots them. Because, man, the whole question of what Marjorie's doing now with her sexuality is really. I wish I would have thought of this before we started talking, because there's a lot going on there. both how she's using it, I think, with Sansa as projecting, like, this is why I will be successful with Joffrey and you weren't. And then how she's actually applying it when she goes to him. And the whole thing with the steel bolt, like, could he, hand me my bolt.
Let me pull back
the talk. It was,
and you put the bolt in, and then you shoot the bolt, and the other weird thing is, did you notice what he shot the bolt into?
Through a boar's head, which is what.
There's some speculation. There's some speculation that might actually be the head of the boar that killed his father, which adds a whole nother Freudian.
I was about to say, Freud is very happy right now.
Yeah.
Everyone, go get your copies of Totem and Taboo. Game of Thrones will be requiring that as reading for the next class.
You'll need your Jung for Bran's sections, and you'll need your Freud for anything dealing with Lannisters.
Fortunately, we still have Tyrion, who is totally devoid of psychoanalysis.
Oh God! Well, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, people. This was fun. We're going into Lacanian hell at this point.
All right, so trying to get ourselves back on track. So the next compare and contrast I'm thinking of is Arya and Theon both in a place of danger and asking the question, "Who are you? Are you a threat to me?" And Arya is in this interesting situation. She's in the woods. Here come some men. Are they a threat? Hot Pie suggests we rob them. And then they are uncovered, but they're in this weird liminal state between safety and danger, where, Thoros of Myr, who, God, I love. I mean, just him and Olenna were just like, I instantly fell in love with their characters. And they're kind of an interesting position between sort of danger and not danger, in that she's prepared to fight them. They're clearly dangerous people. But at the same time, they find her dangerousness amusing and interesting and worthy of respect.
And the one thing I will say is, though, when I was going back to the episode, I don't think they realized that Arya gave up. In that fight at the end, when they're in the bar at the end, and she's like, "My brothers taught me how to fight," and she pulls her sword, he pulls his sword, and he knocks it out of her hand. But if you actually watch that with the kind of anal retentive detail that I do, watch things. She lets her arm go limp, and she lets him knock the sword out of it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am just a girl.
That may be stage combat somewhat.
It might be, but it also might just be her indication that, because especially since it comes right before the Hound reveals who she is.
Oh, yeah.
That might have been like one last, attempt by her to.
Yeah, and given
not be a threat.
And given that the subtext of the conversation is all about, from their side, is who are these children with castle forged steel?
Exactly.
What is their story? And
how did they get out of? Yeah.
Yeah. But in general, I love the introduction of the Brotherhood Without Banners.
Yeah. Who
I identify with more than anyone but Davos Seaworth. And it's interesting to get a bit of politics in the show. That who are they? They are this orthogonal side to the main story that we've been. This story of good guys and bad guys, right? Stark and Lannister. And they come at it from a totally different angle and say, the Lords of Westeros want to burn the countryside, and we're trying to stop them.
And I think the way that interacts with both the Hound and with Arya, it's in going forward, we'll just say, it is really interesting. But Arya's, now I'm sort of like thinking about all of the attempts of people to manipulate others in this episode. Arya's strikes me as on par with Marjorie's, and as I will make myself look harmless.
And she will change her identity to the demands of the moment. That in the books, this is someone who has been Arya, Ari, Weasel. What other names? But she takes on names.
Yeah.
And new
She
identities.
takes on identities, and you know, combine that with the whole thing about the faceless men. One of the things that I have my students about pretty frequently is the fact that with Arya, you know, we could talk about gender relations, but one of the interesting things that Martin realizes that he's doing with Arya, like halfway through the book series, but we're getting it a lot earlier in the television series, right? In the books, it takes a long time for her. You know, she cries over her stitching in the books. In the series, we never see that side of her.
She's a rebel from Word 1.
But she's not really a rebel. She's not trying to rebel against anything. She's trying to be like Sirio, this thing that's neither masculine nor feminine, this sort of in-between figure who is...
Yeah, and there's interesting moments where people mistake her for the wrong thing, and she corrects them or doesn't, depending on what she needs to do.
And I think ideally, what makes her so interesting as a character, and given her later developments, which we'll just sort of table for now, but you know, she represents a figure that is sort of not beyond gender in that conservative way that we should look beyond gender, but beyond gender in a really interesting way. Like she's becoming something in that sort of, you know, that cliched feminist way. She is something other than male or female. She is both and neither, strategically, in a way that is really interesting, and that I can get a bunch of college freshmen to not even realize that they're making these very, you know, feminist arguments about non-essentialism. They don't even realize that they're doing that. They're just saying, I like Arya, I associate with her, she's... Yeah. And it works.
That's interesting because, I mean, at least from the fandom that I've kind of been paying attention to, there is that level of interest in the character, and then there's, like, this really awful layer of, like, Arya is cool because she's, you know, an ass kicker, and Sansa is awful because she's not.
Okay, I do get a lot of that. I mean, that's one of the things I have to fight against.
Yeah.
But they almost universally hate Sansa, except for a couple of contrarians.
Still, even after all of this?
No, they still hate. Well, again, remember, they never get through. They finished the first book in the first season. So they just like her. I have gotten to the point where I can teach them to have a certain amount of respect for Cersei.
Yeah.
But no, Sansa is just, she's a tool at this point, and she's being used at one throughout the first season. But season 3, we're finally starting to see. Although no, she's being used again. She doesn't play that very well.
But you know, she's someone who survived.
11 cakes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there was I love that moment. Is, you know, they're my favorite. Yes, we know. We know everything. So, you know, contrasting Arya's kind of, I guess you could say, limited success, in that she manages to hide who she is and get away scot-free right up until the last second when the Hound drunkenly gives it all away, which I love that bit of drunk acting, where he just, you know, seemed legitimately confused. There's like, wait, why is Thoros here? Why is the Stark girl here? None of this makes any sense.
And it dawns on me that I'm an idiot, because in terms of structure of the episode, we have one hood being taken off in Revelation.
Yep, lots of
we have another being put on. Jesus Christ. Scott, you're a dumbass. Good Lord. And the Theon scenes, he is actually really sympathetic in those scenes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I'm going to be interested in seeing going forward is, you know, in the books, the transformation of Theon from a figure of hate to a figure of sympathy is instant, but it takes...
Oh, no. From a figure of hate to Reek, when we don't know who Reek is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the transition, there is none. He is someone we hate, and then we don't know what he is.
There was a gap of, you know, of many, many years.
Yeah.
In which the fandom was sort of had this image of Theon, and then it completely changed overnight. And here we're seeing, it's going to be interesting to see how people deal with a more gradual, or not more gradual, more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Sort of constant pace of transition?
Yeah. A more continued presence of Theon. And the issue, and we should probably bring Lemieux or Farley into this, somehow, because in terms of the politics of torture, and
yeah,
I mean, because that's going to play a huge part in what is building up sympathy for him. How you feel about torture and the necessity of it, the purpose of it, because they're making it pretty clear that we should like and sympathize with Theon at this point, despite what he thinks he did.
Yeah, because he's the object
of torture.
Yeah. Now, should we spoil where he is? Because I feel in visual terms, I mean, we were talking about like them beating you over the head with this. I honestly think people should figure out from the visuals in this episode where Theon is.
I think not. I think just for we can, because I'm sure it's going to be revealed in a week or two.
Right. So when that gets revealed, I reserve the right to mock anyone who didn't.
But the one thing I think we can note that for those of you again thinking sort of meta about characters, you know that the little minion who just helps Theon at the end, he's not just. I mean, his name was given in the credits as Ramsay Snow, which should actually tell you. Yeah.
Oh my God! They've been so careful to just call him boy in everything.
Yeah, it's in there. It's in there. I didn't notice it when I was watching it, but when I went to Internet Movie Database, he is listed as Ramsay Snow.
Oh, God damn it!
But the thing is
I think it's still going to be a reveal, a shocking reveal.
But it's Ewan
Griffiths.
Yeah, it's the guy from Misfits. If you've ever watched the BBC show Misfits, who, as a major character on a hit BBC television show, watching that episode, you know he's not just going to be playing the flunky. He's not just going to...
He's like, I mean...
Well, he's fucking Batman, is what he is. Yeah. And just seeing him play that, you're like, oh
God. Batman? Really? I've always thought of him more as like the Joker.
No. I mean, if you think about him on Misfits, I mean, he explicitly takes up the role of Batman with the Underground.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about him on this show.
Oh, no.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. No.
He's only been on the show for like a grand total of, what, a minute and a half?
Yeah.
I was just talking about Misfits, where But we've had 3 actors introduced who have legitimate, like, prior commitments, and I don't like to talk about casting a lot, but it is always a decision, and you do know your audience, and you have to take these things into account.
Well, I mean, there's a reason that they picked Natalie Dormer to play a character who is essentially Westeros's version of Anne Boleyn. They're not ignorant to the way that we form associations between
of course
actors and characters.
The big one is. You don't cast Sean Bean. We talked about that last week, but you don't
expect him to survive.
Bean, right? You just
and even in this episode, we get his voice, but they didn't bring him back for one scene.
He will still get he'll still get money from it.
Really?
That means he's still in the 3rd season. He will.
All right.
He will get money the same way that he got money for those. The
head on a spike.
Yeah, well, he got money for Two Towers and Return of the King and just
all right.
flashbacks.
So I mean, I don't know what Farley and Lemieux will say about torture. I thought it was interesting that he starts out asking questions. Where am I? Who are you? And that he gets the answer. I'm just a guy who wants to hurt you. I just want to do this to you. And then they ask him a question that they seem very uninterested in, which seems to me to be more of like a fourth wall moment, where it's like the writers have figured out we can get some like character development in this scene because they ask him the question, why did you take Winterfell?
Yeah.
And the subtext is, what is Theon Greyjoy about? Who is he? What motivates him?
And he doesn't know the answer to that question.
Well, he gives 3 different answers, and we don't know which one. He says conquest, family, or revenge. And we don't know which one's the right one.
Well, or that... And again, I've been dealing with this all day as a sort of wrestle with the Mad Men premiere. The idea of identity when you have, Don Draper on a beach with the GI moving. There's all sorts of weird things with the Mad Men thing. But my point is just, I think it's almost more interesting when we say I don't even think the characters know. Like, and that's one of the points about the torture breeding sympathy is that, you know, it's sort of common among left circles, at least at this point, that people will say anything if tortured. And the question
Leon says that explicitly.
Yeah.
He says,
but the
I
question
will tell you
that
anything.
you ask someone, right, that under torture, that is sort of the worst question for the person being tortured is, I mean, it's actually, who are you? Like, you know, who are you? I mean, how do you answer that question correctly? I mean, and of course, obviously, top of my head, there's this whole British TV show that has been going on for 50 years. It's predicated on the inability to answer this question normally, much less under torture. But, you know, who are you? I don't know how. I don't know how I would answer that question.
And I did like the fact that, speaking of identity, that the boy is introduced the way he is, given what we kind of lost in season 2 from the decisions they make. That, you know, here is yet another character who's all about identity and reinventing identity with this weird twist. Can I talk about this? That, I mean, maybe you want to cut this.
Yeah, maybe we should. We should pre-cut it so I don't have to edit it later. But
okay,
we can get back to it. I mean,
let's just say that he does something interesting with identity that other characters don't.
Yeah, and I was like the one identity that in this episode I really wanted to take a screen capture of and then caption it. I think this is the episode we lose Rick on. Like, he ran off, and I just wanted to like
Rick on from minute 1, really.
Yeah, but I mean, he actually runs away, and I just want to like take a screen capture and like, bye, Rick on.
Well,
like,
I mean,
it was
look,
nice knowing you.
Season 1.
Hypothetical novels.
Yeah, I mean, season 1. You know, he got to point and laugh at Bran, and then even his own family, like, forgot about him, and he shows up as like this weird damaged kid living in a crypt, and then season 2 he's the kid who wants to smash walnuts. You know,
and in season 3 he lives in part. And he runs away. Yeah. And that's the last we ever see of him. That's a bit of a spoiler, but it's okay because we have not heard from him in 8 novels. And I know that incorrect, so all you people Westeros.org, shut up. I know they're on.
So, you know, 2 things I just kind of wanted to check in on. One is this sort of just update on the war effort. And what's going on with Robb Stark. They've taken Harrenhal. Roose Bolton has been left in charge, and at the end of the episode retakes the Kingslayer. I did notice that the Bolton banners are really in evidence throughout this episode, in these Stark colors.
Yes,
not colors of the House Stark.
I think everyone who grew up reading X-Men sort of couldn't help but notice pretty continually the Bolton banners. Sort of hard to get away from them. God, and we should talk about we should talk about Kat's admission that we never get in the book of her attempt to love Jon Snow.
Yes, and this has been hugely controversial because, you know, I think it was one of the reviewers said that this was character
assassination. Name edited in later.
Yeah, name edited in later. Said that this was character assassination. And I think that's bullshit.
No, I think it's the opposite. I think it's not character assassination. It's an attempt to make her more sympathetic, not less. I mean...
Yeah, and I think it's weird that, like, given that the #1 strike against Catelyn in the fandom is that she was mean to Jon Snow, who is everybody's, favorite emotional, teenager, that we get the story of, no, she actually tried to love him, she felt bad things about him and then felt guilty about that, And I thought, given her nature in the books, of course Catelyn Stark would think that like she caused him to get sick, and that her failure to live up to her promise to the gods is the reason that her family, is suffering. That's kind of what she does. She tries to sort of load all of the guilt of the world onto herself.
I agree, and it did not strike me as out of character for her to, and in fact I thought it was sort of brave for them to admit that, or to at least set it up that she failed. Because, I mean, that's sort of the worst failure you can have, is in primetime television terms. The worst thing you can be is a bad
mother. Yeah.
Right? And, and it's just, you can be a bad dad. You can leave your kid for 15 years. If you come back, you will be lauded as a role model by conservatives everywhere because you took care of your kid. But if you are a bad mother or bad stepmother, that is just not a good thing to... and she was confessing it, and it was a confessional scene. And again, I'm just kicking myself for not noticing the visuals earlier, but when I was screen capping it, a good half of the captures I took, she has her eyes closed as if she might as well be in a booth.
Yeah. Well, and look at what she's doing with her hands the whole time. She's constructing an image of the gods.
Good God.
Which, by the way, that seems like no one has figured out what these things are that she's been doing since the first season. It's a 7-pointed star within a circle, and at each of the points of the star is a little puppet of one of the 7 gods. And I think it's a sign that like one of the elements of her character that they're really building up is that she is not just a mother and a politician, but a woman of faith in a pseudo-Catholic religion.
Which will come in when things happen to Cersei, which we were not going to talk about now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we should talk about that. But I think we should sort of wind up the discussion now because we're starting to get a lag. And if I don't,
I'm out of topics as well. So.
Oh no, I actually, in all honesty, I have like 9 more things I want to talk about now that you kind of. This should be like the pre-game show. We should have had this conversation, and then I can go back and realize all the visual things. But I will post something in the next couple of days.
We'll chat it out in the comments.
But it's been great again.
Yeah, likewise.
And we will do this next week.
All right. See you all.
Bye, everyone else.